Charlie Laidlaw, Simon McLean, how are you?
I'm very well, and you?
Great, thanks. Thanks for inviting us through this
No
morning to lovely Ghislaine and arranging nice weather for us.
Right.
Going to try and get a wee walk in your beach. Once
Excellent,
we're done here,
excellent.
Make the day worthwhile. Charlie, we were just saying on the way through here how fascinating it is, the different characters that we get to meet in the world of authorship. And you certainly fall into that category. Before we go into your current project and your launch that's coming up in June with Ringwood, tell us a bit about your history and where you come from, etc.
Well, I was born in Paisley, which
Sorry about that.
which wasn't my fault. But brought up in the west of Scotland, but moved across to Edinburgh to study at university.
Okay.
First job as a journalist in Glasgow, and then I moved to London. Spent about 14 years in London, and then moved back to Edinburgh.
Still journalisting?
I'm still journalisting in the sense that I write for websites and I write articles for companies and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So still journalisting, yeah.
So a history in words, really?
A history in words.
Communication.
A history in words. It's the only thing I can do. I mean,
Fair enough.
Writing words is all I can do, yeah. So
Okay.
I made a career of it.
So when was your first book?
My first book was, I think, 2017. That was with Ringwood.
Okay.
And hopefully that's going to be republished by Ringwood at some point next year.
Right. What was that called?
It was originally called The Herbal Detective.
Right.
It was republished by a big publisher as Love Potions and Other Calamities.
Okay.
And Ringwood have said that they will republish it hopefully next year.
Because it wasn't successful, it wasn't marketed properly, or?
It wasn't really marketed properly, no. It was one of these books that fell between cracks as one publisher was taken over by another publisher, and it never really got the attention that I think it deserved.
Charlie, if you've had this history of journalism, and a life in words, if you like, how come 2017 before you wrote your first book?
I wrote my first book when I was about 14 years old,
Right.
and happily I threw it onto a bonfire. And yeah, I've written several books in that intervening period, all of them incredibly bad. And I think that's been the journey of a lot of writers, is that they've got a story inside them, or they think they've got a story inside them, but when they come to put it down on paper, they either never finish it, or they don't really know how to write it. And that was my experience. I knew how to write, but I didn't know how to write a book.
Okay. That's interesting, because it is a process, isn't it? And how much of that do you think the author can judge? Because I know, as a first-time author, I've only written one book, that I needed reassurance all the way through that process that what I was doing was of any value whatsoever. Because we're all our worst self-critics, aren't we?
Well, my first book, it started off as a kind of spooky book set in Sussex. The second draft of it became a kind of police procedural, still based in Sussex. And it wasn't until about draft 4 that it became a rather wacky comedy set in East Lothian. And I think that first-time authors go through a period of self-doubt, which they've got to have reassurance.
Yes.
But it took me a long time to become confident as an author. I now have that confidence,
Right.
but it took me years to learn how to.
Did you have a sounding board then? Someone that you could let read what you were doing?
I had sounding boards, but the trouble with sounding boards is that people do tell you, "Oh, it's great, fantastic, brilliant," and you know they're lying through their teeth.
I had the opposite experience. The only 3 sounding boards, really, although I had one close to home who helped me immensely, the 3 outward sources that I used were my children,
Right.
and my brother, my 2 kids and my brother. My son, my oldest son, just used it as a marking procedure. He marked it like a lecturer would mark a piece of work,
Right.
with red ink as well, and was so critical because my book was born in the 70s when I joined the police. It's a memoir
Right.
of my police career. So everything in it to him is abhorrent because it's non-politically correct. Talking about Neds and things like that. So he marked it like that. Dad, you can't say this, you can't do that, you can't do the next thing. My brother tried not to be critical, but I can read between the lines because he's my brother. And I knew that he didn't like it, and he didn't think it was funny enough, whatever that means, as if he'd be a judge. And my sister in Australia was the worst of all, because she ignored it completely.
Right.
She asked for it. When am I getting to see this? When am I getting to see this?
Right.
And then I got no feedback whatsoever.
Right.
So they were all the three of them were obstacles that could have stopped me in my tracks if I wasn't so stubborn. So my point to you was that I think to any new author is that you need to be very focused on what you're trying to achieve. Would you agree?
I think you've got to be focused, but certainly for years and years I just went down blind alleys in writing. And what I would say to any new author was, having written my first book, and it took years to write it, my second book, which again is going to be republished, I hope, by Ringwood next year, is I wrote the first chapter and the last chapter. And that gave a starting point and it gave a finishing point.
Right.
And it was much easier then to fill out the bits in between.
That's interesting, because everyone you speak to has got a different process about how to
I
go
know,
about
and
it.
that's what I do now. I have a very clear idea how the book starts. I have a very clear idea how the book ends.
And your books are fictional.
My books are fictional.
So are the characters in your head, are they already formed? Do they have traits? Do they have personalities already before you put pen to paper?
I think that writing a book is a process.
Okay.
You've got an idea for a plot, you've got an idea for storylines, you start to write, and the characters begin to speak to you.
Right.
And for me, it's when I can actually listen to a character and they tell me what they're thinking and what they're saying. In my second book, that became very clear, because when I wrote it...
What was that called?
That was The Things We Learned When We're Dead.
Right.
And hopefully, that, I said, Ringwood will republish that next year.
Yes.
But I would write a whole screed of dialogue, for example, and then this character would come into my head and say, Charlie, that's absolute rubbish. I wouldn't say that.
Right.
And
So you start to see it from the perspective of your character.
Yeah, and that book...
It's kind of schizophrenia going on here.
Yeah, exactly, which is probably, I need medicine or something. But yeah, my main character, she largely wrote that book for me.
Right.
In a funny way.
It's funny you say she, because something I've learned over the short space of time I've been looking at some of your work is that you tend to write from a she perspective, from a female perspective.
I do.
Is there a reason for that you're aware of?
I've been asked that question before, and I've probably just given completely different answers every time I'm asked it. But in the nicest possible way, and I do mean it in the nicest possible way, I think women are more interesting characters.
Right.
It's the reason why I suppose the nursing profession, for example, is largely women.
Mm-hmm.
There is a complexity and a caring side to women that I think is sometimes missing in men. I think for writing about men, I would write two-dimensional, because I think men are more two-dimensional.
Yeah.
Women are more three-dimensional, and that interests me.
That is a very, very diplomatic answer, Charlie. Congratulations on that one. When I asked the question, I was hoping that you might be the guy that's figured them out. No, okay. So that search continues.
That search will continue forever, yeah.
We're looking at June this year. We don't have a date just yet. Hopefully we will have shortly for the launch of your, relaunch if you like, but your Ringwood launch of your book. Tell me the name again. The Time Between Space.
The Time Between Space.
Got it. How's that launch going to take place? Do you know how that's going to happen yet?
I don't, because I don't have any details of dates, but it will be, I presume, in an Edinburgh bookshop.
Okay, and there'll be invitations go out before.
Invitations will go out and all that, yes.
Great stuff. Tell us a bit about the book, Charlie.
The book is...
Without any spoilers.
Without any spoilers. I suppose it's at one level it's a very simple book. It's about a young girl growing up. Her father is a famous film star, and she grows up in East Lothian, where all my books are set, incidentally.
Right. Strangely enough.
I can't be bothered writing about anywhere else.
Well, they say you should write about what you know.
Exactly. But she grows up in East Lothian and she moves to Edinburgh. She has mental problems. And these mental problems get worse as she gets older. And she has to find a new beginning somewhere. And she finds a new beginning in her grandfather, who is an Italian astrophysicist, who has written a theory on the universe.
Right.
And out of that, she is an infinitesimally small part of the universe. Mm-hmm. And she begins to find a new recognition that actually that doesn't matter. She's a human being. She can live with that.
Right.
And the book, I think, the inspiration of it, I think came from my son, who is an astrophysicist.
Okay.
And he pointed out the fact to me that there are more grains of sand, there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth.
Right.
If you think of all the sand pits, beaches,
Yes.
deserts on Earth,
Seabeds.
and there are more stars in the universe than all of those put together. Yeah. So that's really, in a nutshell.
That was the premise for the idea.
That was the idea, yeah. I think you're going to start with an idea.
Yeah.
All books, I think, start with just one small idea, because inspiration for books only comes in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
And the thing is to find that first little chunk and then build on it.
And I'm a believer that you need to know why you're doing something in order to keep you doing it.
Yeah.
Especially a process like writing a book. It probably took me 6 months, having already started a year before. I had a foundation, but 6 months of serious work to finish it off. But it was the thought that I had dedicated doing it to my late daughter that kept me going.
Right.
When I woke up in the morning and thought, can I be bothered doing that today? It was that in the back of my mind about why I was doing it that was the important thing.
Yeah.
So I think you need to know what your purpose is, and yours was to get that message across.
Yeah.
So we'll have the launch in June with Ringwood publishing the book. Was Ringwood wasn't your first publisher then?
Ringwood was my first publisher.
And then you went to other publishers?
Then I went to other publishers, and now back to Ringwood.
Okay. Tell me your experience of the publishing industry then, Sally, if we can condense that into a couple of minutes, if that's possible. Because that's what I want to explore here with authors, is their experience with publishers and the pitfalls that are there for everyone that wants to tell the stories.
I suppose that every publisher is different. And every publisher gives more support or less support to authors. I think the publishing world has changed out of all recognition in the last few years. All sorts of different publishers have sprung up, looking at different niches in the market. And also self-publishing has changed the market even further. So I don't think that any author should worry too much about what publisher they're being published with, as long as they go into the whole process with realistic expectations and a realistic agenda of what they're expected to do and what the publisher is expected to do.
I don't know about you, but with Ringwood, Sandy made it very clear to me that when it came to marketing, Ringwood, that wasn't their forte at all. They would help me edit the book, proofread the book, and produce a worthwhile work. But when it came to marketing it, I was going to have to take the lead on that, and that's exactly how Sandy told me. Has that been your experience as well?
Well, as I said, it's all down to expectation. And the great thing about Ringwood, I do mean this sincerely, they do publish books that look good, they're error-free, and they've been through a rigorous process of getting them to a really good publishable state. And that's something that a lot of publishers don't do. So Ringwood should be proud of that achievement.
Okay. You mentioned self-publishing there, which has become a thing now because of the internet and because of the world that we live in. Not just for books, but for all sorts of artistic and creative endeavours. This is your self-published book.
That's my self-published book.
Being Alert.
Being Alert, yeah.
Tell us how that came about, Charlie, because I think it's fascinating.
I think it came about partly out of boredom in 2020.
Lockdown.
In lockdown. and what I perceived to be the government's complete ineptitude in dealing with COVID-19.
Right.
So over the first 6 months of 2020, I decided I will write a complete fictional satire on what the government didn't do or did badly.
Yeah. Is this the UK government?
UK government.
Okay.
Yeah. It touches on governments elsewhere.
Yes. Yes.
But the UK government. And
how they handled the pandemic.
Yeah, how they mishandled it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Oh, there's no question.
But I wrote it also with a serious intent that it asks the right question about what the government could and should have done, the questions that public inquiries will be asking the government in due course. So there's a serious intent to it, but in writing it, there had to be some altruistic reason for writing it as well. And it's dedicated to the people who've got us through the pandemic so far, and it's, as far as I'm able, to raise a little bit of money for NHS charities.
Brilliant. And of course the people we lost during the pandemic. Because the very obvious thing that comes to mind for me, because I agree with you 100% about the mishandling of it, is the lives that it cost.
Yeah.
And continues to cost. Because every mistake goes forward.
Yeah.
You can't correct them as we move forward.
Well, there's a lot of research went into that book, a lot of research. And a lot of research to demonstrate that small decisions had very big consequences.
And it's funny as well, or you hope.
And it's funny. Yeah, it is funny.
It's very difficult knowing whether your book's funny or not, isn't it?
Well, people have said it's funny.
Right, well that's the judge. They're the judges, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're the actual judges. Charlie, I'm fascinated by the project that you're involved in now. One of the projects that you're involved now is your writing school, creativewriters.com.
Creating
Writers. Okay, well that says everything, doesn't it? You're creating writers. Can you tell me how that came about and what the objectives are? No.
Yeah, I can. I'm just trying to think.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's we've run two courses, an introductory course in creative writing and a diploma course. And the diploma course it gives a real diploma at the end of it.
Are these online courses?
It's all online.
Okay.
But it's with a lot of one-to-one tuition. So it's not online.
I understand.
We have tutors who will be online, but with students one-to-one every week.
Okay.
So it's very much hands-on. It's very much... it's a course designed to get you to start writing a book.
Okay.
And it came about really from my frustration over many years. As I said, in going down rabbit holes and not writing. The course is really built around my experience in making sure that we give students the right tools to actually write their book and to know what makes good writing.
Okay. And it seems to fit very comfortably with the Ringwood ethos for publishing, which is to come in from the side where the big publishers have left everyone stranded because they're only interested in making money now. That's the basic premise of it. And give an opportunity to people to get their stories published that are of merit. Well,
that's right. I mean, publishers aren't there to publish books that are wonderful pieces of fiction or whatever. They're there to make money.
Yeah.
And that's where the Ringwoods of this world do fit in, because they are there, hopefully, to publish books that have merit, rather than books that will necessarily make a lot of money.
And the self-publishing, what I've noticed recently is that there are lots of self-publishing things up there to help you self-publish, but they want money off you. And how on earth do you tell the genuine ones from the rascals that there will be in every market? There's going to be rascals trying to take money off you. You aware of any of those pitfalls for people that are thinking about self-publishing?
I'm not really aware of the particular pitfalls because I just went through Amazon.
Right.
And I knew that Amazon would do a good job, and they did. But certainly looking at creating writers, there are a lot of people out there who are offering courses in creative writing, and they're nonsense.
Right.
And people get sucked into trying to fulfill their dream of writing a book, and they take advice from the wrong people. And I hope that creating writers, given my experience, we can actually help people in a genuine way.
Yeah. The thing about writing a book is there's so many genres as well that require a different approach, perhaps.
Well, certainly I went from Ringwood to another publisher who was then based in Wales, and they were a big publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an imprint, I can't remember what the imprint was called, but it published erotica.
Right.
And then 50 Shades of Grey came along.
And blew them all out of the water.
And it blew this imprint out of the water, because every big publisher suddenly realised that mummy porn was a market. They'd never thought of it as a market before.
Of course.
So again, the world of publishing is changing as people invent new genres or invent new ways of saying old things. I'm a great believer that everything under the sun has already been said.
Right.
And mostly by Shakespeare.
Okay.
Even Shakespeare went back to people like Ovid in ancient Roman Greece for his inspiration. So there's nothing that could be written now that hasn't already been written.
Okay.
And publishers are constantly trying to repackage everything in a different way.
Yeah, from a different slant.
Yeah.
And it's interesting with 50 Shades, then there's all these copycats that sell.
Yeah.
That sell thereafter.
As soon as
Because they see there's a niche in the market.
she published that book, and it turned out to be she self-published it, don't forget, first.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she self-published it.
Right. And then it was bought up.
Then it was bought up and became an international sensation.
And the marketing is so important to these things as well, isn't it? It's, I saw a thing in Asda. I read a thing about Asda, and there are other supermarkets available, obviously. But if they put a basket in the aisle, in the book aisle, or any aisle for that matter, whatever they put in that basket will sell. Because it's highlighted to the customers that are walking past. It's almost like point of sale in a shop. The precious part of any shop is at the till.
Yeah.
If you can get your product at the till, point of sale, people will pick it up almost routinely.
Yeah.
And it's the same with books or anything that are in a basket. And that's what they did with 50 Shades. They marketed it so that people would just
absolutely
take it on holiday. It's a holiday book, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And that's the kind of thing we can't do with our books.
No.
We haven't got that kind of clout. So, for people watching this perhaps who think they could start writing a book, how would you tell them to start that process? To go and get some information about, like from creating writers?
Either from someone like me or, I think the important thing is, to as you say, to know why you're writing your book.
Yeah.
And to have a kernel of an idea. I just feel that I spent many years not really writing because I didn't really know why or what I was writing.
Okay.
So I think people have to have a very clear idea on all of that. And also, although we learned to write at primary school, actually writing well is a skill that takes learning. You can't suddenly go out and be a plumber, or you can't go out and be a policeman, or you can't go out and be an electrician. You've got to learn how to do it. And the same is true of writing. And because it is such an easy skill that people think they have, a lot of people just write not very well.
Yeah. And interestingly, with the electrician or the plumber or the policeman, the way to learn any of these things, and I would just say the way to learn anything is to do it.
Yeah.
So you have to be doing the writing, getting feedback on it, and honest feedback on it, so that you can hone those skills, which is the same in learning anything at all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't write a book without writing it.
Yeah. And once you've written it, what then? Is creating writers going to take us on to the next stage, you think? Because you're going to meet a lot of creative people and people with great ideas.
Well, creating writers, we do offer an editing service.
Ah, good.
So if someone has written a book, we will give an honest appraisal and help that author.
Okay. And through creating writers, do you get any qualifications or anything that's of value in the marketplace when you've done the course?
You get a diploma.
Right.
On the main course, you get a diploma.
So the course is accredited in that way?
Course is accredited, and it's not just aimed at people who want to write a novel, although that's its main purpose. But we all now have to write in our day-to-day jobs, whether that's a social media post or an article for a website or whatever. People are expected now to be able to communicate in a more professional way than they ever had to do before.
Yeah.
So having a writing qualification can be a good thing to put on someone's CV.
Yes, very much so. I had this discussion with Sandy of Ringwood about the publishing industry and writing. The skills that we learn along the way are life skills, communication skills.
Absolutely.
That are very cross-transferable into every walk of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the future, Charlie, what we got lined up over the next few years? Have you looked that far ahead now that the world's opening up again?
I know. The first thing is probably to go and have a holiday.
Right. I know you've got a wee granddaughter.
Wee granddaughter out in Austria, yeah.
Right. So have you been there to see
I
her?
haven't, no. She's been across to see us, but
Right.
that's the first thing we want to do is go across
I asked that
to
because
Austria.
there's people just now I know who are just getting to meet their grandchildren.
I
Who
know.
are a year or 18 months old.
I know.
In Australia and things like
I know.
that. So Austria's on the cards, is it?
Firmly on the agenda.
Good.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Elisa.
Elisa. Lovely. So, creative-wise, have you got any more ideas? I'm sure you have. I'm sure you got lots of ideas.
Yeah, I suppose that once the writing bug takes hold, you write.
You miss it when you don't.
I miss it when I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss it when I don't, and it's a good discipline to get into because the more you write, the more ideas you get.
Yeah, it's self-perpetuating.
It's self-perpetuating. But I've got a book finished, which is with Ringwood at the moment. And
Okay.
we'll see what happens there.
Okay.
And we've got, as I said, we've got The Time Between Space being published in June, and I've got two other titles that Ringwood have expressed an interest in republishing, and so we'll see where we go from there.
And your creatingwriters.com is just getting up and running now?
That's just getting up and running now, yeah.
Is the website there?
The website's there, yeah.
So people can go on and have a look
They
at
can
it.
go and have a look, yeah.
See if it suits them.
Yeah,
And get in
absolutely.
touch, I take it, and
Yeah,
explore
absolutely.
what's available to them. I had a wee look at it, and the one thing I saw was that it's not a 2-week course or a 2-month course or a 6-month course. It's very much designed to suit the lifestyle of the person that's going to be doing the course. So it's not a pressurised situation that they're coming
No, I
into.
think in this day and age, people are doing courses in between,
Yes.
other responsibilities.
Yeah.
Whether that's a job or caring responsibilities or as a parent or a carer, whatever. I think you've got to now build courses around people rather than shoehorn people into a course.
Yeah. And it's very much a one-on-one experience.
Very much a one-on-one, yeah, absolutely. That's what I think makes it different to the majority of courses. It is very much one-on-one.
Great stuff. Charlie, thanks very much for inviting us through. I think we'll speak again, especially about the creating writers as that moves on, because that's a fascinating project that you're taking on.
Yeah, I hope so.
And it's hopefully global as well, because it's internet
absolutely.
based.
Absolutely.
So great, and any excuse to come through to the East Coast anytime, Charlie.
Well, very nice to see you.
Yeah, great to meet you.
you.
Thank you.